Marielle Voss had never imagined her life could collapse in a single evening. At 26, she had lived quietly, carving her existence between the cracks of a family that had already decided she was useless. Talent, ambition, kindness, none of it mattered. She was a shadow in their eyes, a burden cleverly disguised as a daughter. And yet, tonight, the shadows felt heavier, darker, suffocating. The city lights outside reflected off the polished floors of the Blackthorn penthouse, casting long, harsh streaks across the glass walls. Marielle's heels clicked nervously against marble as she followed her parents into the vast, cold space, every step echoing like a verdict in her ears. The scent of expensive cologne mingled with a faint undertone of citrus cleaners, sharp and sterile, almost deliberately intimidating. He was waiting. Oleron Blackthorn, the man who had earned whispers of fear and awe throughout the human world and the supernatural community alike. Billionaire. Alpha. Ruthless. Magnetic. Standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette cut against the cityscape, a living monument to power and precision. Even before he spoke, he had her attention, her breath catching despite herself. Marielle, her father began, voice artificially warm, like the practiced melody of someone delivering bad news as a gift. We've arranged for your future. Her stomach twisted, a cold knot of betrayal tightening as she realized the truth. She was being handed over, given, to Oleron. The words were mechanical, stripped of compassion, leaving only humiliation in their wake. Marielle lifted her chin, forcing composure as a flush of anger burned across her cheeks. She did not bow. She did not tremble. She squared her shoulders, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear fully bloom. Oleron's gaze fell on her then, piercing, calculating, and yet intrigued. He did not smile, and yet there was a flicker in his expression, subtle, almost imperceptible, a recognition of defiance. Something in the way she carried herself, small yet unyielding, roused him. Her pride, like a quiet flame, was irritatingly magnetic. "You must be Marielle," he said finally, his voice low, commanding, velvet smooth, and edged with an unspoken power. Each syllable wrapped around her like a rope she didn't want to touch, yet couldn't pull away from. "I am," she replied, voice steady despite the quiver that betrayed her inner turmoil. Her gaze did not falter, even as she caught the faintest glimmer of surprise in his golden eyes, a flash of wolf instinct lurking beneath the billionaire's facade. The room seemed to contract around her, every polished surface reflecting her image, a young woman caught between duty and desire, resentment and awe, fear and an inexplicable pull toward a man she had barely met. Every shadow of the penthouse seemed to whisper, reminding her that here, she was powerless. Yet the tension in Oleron's stance, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the slow, deliberate measuring of her, suggested that perhaps power was more fluid than she had been told. Oleron took a step closer, not aggressively, but with the kind of confident precision that left no room for misinterpretation. The space between them was electric, charged with something unnameable. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but not from fear alone. She felt the pull of him, magnetic, intoxicating, dangerous, and she resisted because resisting was all she knew how to do. "You don't belong in that world," he said softly, almost to himself, yet loud enough that she heard. "And yet here you are." Marielle bristled, confusion mixing with the heat of indignation. "I belong wherever I choose," she said, every word sharp, deliberate, a challenge she did not intend, yet could not stop herself from issuing. Oleron's eyes narrowed, and she felt it, the wolf, beneath the billionaire's control, stirring. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but she sensed it, instinctively. It was not threatening, not yet. But it was there, acknowledging her, respecting her, yet questioning why she resisted so. The city hummed outside, indifferent to the tension inside the penthouse. She could hear the faint echoes of traffic, the distant wail of a siren, and yet, nothing mattered. Not the city. Not her family. Not the carefully crafted facade of Alaron Blackthorn. Only the space between them, electric and suffocating. Her hands flexed to her sides, nails pressing into her palms as she fought to control her rising heartbeat. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to escape this gilded cage of expectation and power. Yet every instinct also told her to stay.
To see.
To understand. To resist, yes, but not entirely. "You're not what I expected," Alaron admitted finally, the words low, almost intimate. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. Admiration? Curiosity? Perhaps a warning? Marielle's lips pressed into a thin line, and she did not answer. She didn't need to. The air between them spoke. Her defiance. His control. The unspoken recognition that in this room, two wolves, two strong, proud beings, had collided. She caught her reflection in the glass behind him. Pale light brushing her hair, shadows deepening under her cheekbones, eyes bright and unyielding. And in that reflection, she saw him reflected too, the intensity, the golden gaze, the impossible draw of a man she had been told she must fear. Her heart thudded erratically, the kind of rhythm that belonged to someone stepping into danger, yet stepping willingly, because part of her could not deny the pull. Alaron's attention lingered on her for a long, tense moment. The silence between them was not empty. It was alive, charged with anticipation, with the promise of things neither dared speak aloud. His wolf prowled at the edges of that calm, and she could feel it, a subtle tremor in the air, a hint of the power he held at bay, just enough to keep her intrigued, just enough to make her aware that what awaited was larger, more dangerous, more consuming than she had ever imagined. Her parents exchanged polite smiles behind her back, oblivious to the storm brewing in the room, blind to the current that had shifted between their daughter and the alpha before her. The air between her and Alaron seemed to hum louder than any words could capture. "Welcome to your future, Marielle," her father said, and then, like a curtain falling, the room felt heavier, colder, yet somehow, paradoxically, more alive. Alaron tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed both casual and deliberate, and Marielle felt it like a jolt, an acknowledgement of something that neither her parents nor she yet understood. He was observing her, weighing her, not as someone handed to him, but as a puzzle, a challenge, and a thrill. And somewhere deep in the pit of her chest, Marielle realized, this was just the beginning. If you can't look away from her pain and his power, subscribe now, or drop your country in the comments and admit why you're resisting this story. Don't leave before the obsession begins. The night had settled like a velvet cloak over the city, but inside the towering Blackthorn penthouse, time itself seemed to pause. Marielle Voss had expected the cold indifference of a man who had everything in the world and wanted little of it. She had expected disdain, perhaps a flicker of boredom at her existence. What she had not expected was the intensity of being seen, truly seen, by Alaron Blackthorn. The formalities began with a deliberate distance. He gestured toward the seating area, and she moved gracefully, though her pulse thudded like a drum echoing in a vast chamber. Every footstep, every shuffle of her dress seemed amplified in the cavernous, opulent room. The chandeliers above reflected the soft glimmer of city lights outside, casting fractured patterns on marble floors, each shard of illumination highlighting the subtle tension coiling between them. Alaron's presence was suffocating in the most exhilarating way. He sat with deliberate poise, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on the arm of his chair, and his eyes, those impossibly golden eyes, never left her. They didn't merely observe, they dissected, understood, and, she suspected, judged. Each glance weighed a fraction heavier than the last, compelling her to straighten her posture, to speak clearly, even when every instinct screamed to flee. "You've been through much," he began, voice measured, a low hum of control, yet carrying a nuance that suggested more than mere acknowledgement. "And yet you endure. I find that remarkable." Marielle's lips parted in nervous laughter, a sound she barely recognized as her own. It was awkward, sincere, and yet, somehow, It drew a fleeting curve in the corners of his mouth, a gesture so subtle it could have been missed entirely, but she saw it. Her heart stumbled. "I endure because I must," she replied, careful with her words, aware that in this room, every syllable could be dissected, analyzed, and held against her. And yet, there was a thrill in speaking, a dangerous joy in watching him lean in slightly, just enough that the air between them crackled with electric anticipation. He studied her, his gaze like a magnetic pull, and she shivered, both from the chill of the penthouse and the intensity of being measured by a man whose control had never been questioned, until now. Aleron's wolf stirred beneath the surface, silent, vigilant, aching to stretch, to claim, to overwhelm, but he held it at bay, fascinated by the restraint Marielle forced from him. Each defiance, each subtle challenge, made his restraint harder, more tantalizing, more intoxicating. "You are not like them," he said, his voice a low rumble, threading through the room like the whisper of a storm. "Your family sees only shadows, only expectation. I see its potential. And fire." Marielle's breath hitched. Fire? She had long believed she was too small, too ordinary, too unworthy for notice, let alone admiration. And yet, here was a man whose reputation alone commanded fear, who possessed strength beyond imagining, and he was watching her, studying her, perhaps even respecting her. The dichotomy twisted inside her, weaving confusion with desire, vulnerability with defiance. "You speak as though you know me," she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the city outside, fragile yet audacious. "But you don't." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly, like a predator amused by its prey's courage. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I see what you refuse to see yourself." It was not the words alone, but the way he spoke them, measured, deliberate, resonant with authority, that sent a ripple through her. She was aware of every movement, the tilt of his wrist, the slight tightening of his fingers on the armrest, the imperceptible flexing of muscles beneath his tailored suit. Every detail whispered of control, of power, of a wolf lying in wait beneath the human facade. And yet, there was curiosity too, a vulnerability that flickered only for her, and it pulled her in like gravity itself. She noticed the subtle shifts, the micro-expressions others would never detect, the faint crease of his brow when she pushed back verbally, the almost imperceptible lean closer when she challenged him with wit. These tiny cracks in his perfect control were mesmerizing, intoxicating. She was learning, perhaps faster than she should, that he was a man of extremes, cold and commanding, yet disarmingly responsive to her defiance. "I don't know if I should trust you," Marielle admitted, voice trembling with a blend of fear and exhilaration. I don't even know if I want to." Aleron's eyes softened ever so slightly, the golden hue flashing warmer in the ambient light. "Trust is earned," he said, almost a whisper, "and you've already begun." Every word he spoke seemed to linger in the room, bending time, stretching moments into eternity. She felt the pull of him, not just his magnetism, but the primal echo of the wolf beneath the veneer of wealth and control. Her own instincts stirred. Flight waged war against fascination, and yet the pull of him, the undeniable chemistry of proximity and shared defiance, anchored her in place. They circled each other conversationally, each statement a brush of teeth along skin too aware, each laugh a spark igniting tension that neither could fully name. Marielle laughed, a nervous, melodic sound, and he noticed the way her shoulders softened just slightly, a glimpse into the real her beneath layers of cultivated composure. He caught it, and it awakened something protective, possessive, yet restrained. "Why are you here?" she asked suddenly, forcing him to break the spell of silence and tension. "Why me?" His gaze sharpened, and for a heartbeat, the alpha slipped past the billionaire mask. "Because you are not what anyone else expects. And I am," his jaw clenched almost imperceptibly, "curious about what fire burns inside you that defies the world." Her breath caught. Curiosity had never felt so potent, so frightening, so unbearably intimate. She had been gifted to him, cast aside by her own family, and yet in this moment, he saw her as an equal, as a challenge, as irresistible. And she knew, without needing to be told, that the wolf beneath the man's skin was alive, restless, and aware of her in a way that no one else ever had been. Marielle shifted slightly, testing boundaries, daring him, feeling the charge of electricity that passed between them. Every movement was laden with tension, her hands lightly brushing a table, the curve of her neck exposed just enough to draw attention, the soft intake of breath when he leaned slightly closer. Oleron resisted, but barely. The wolf prowled beneath his skin, aware of every scent, every heartbeat, every subtle tremor of desire and fear she carried. "You are dangerous," she whispered, half in defiance, half in awe. Oleron's lips quirked, almost imperceptibly. "And you," he said, voice low, magnetic, "are impossible to ignore." The city beyond the penthouse walls went on, oblivious to the storm contained within, a battle of wills, of attraction, of raw, electric tension. Marielle's pulse raced, her thoughts scrambled, her instincts screamed to run, even as every fiber of her being quivered with the desire to stay. Oleron, every inch controlled, every instinct honed and lethal, fought not to overwhelm her, not to claim what was already magnetically, irrevocably drawn toward him. Every glance, every word, every micro-movement deepened the web of fascination, the slow, intoxicating pull that neither of them fully understood, yet both felt with a clarity that bordered on obsession. It was a dance of restraint and challenge, a psychological tango where every heartbeat mattered, every exhale whispered temptation. If your pulse is racing with theirs, if you can feel every word, every glance, every hidden spark, subscribe now. Don't let this bond slip through your fingers. If you won't, drop your country in the comments and tell us why you resisted the pull. The city hummed beneath a quilt of stars, distant car horns, and the subtle pulse of life that never slept. Marielle found herself drawn, almost unconsciously, to the rooftop gardens of her building, an oasis of quiet amidst the chaos, where glass and steel met creeping ivy and soft, hidden lights. She hadn't intended to meet anyone here. In fact, she often came to escape, to breathe, to feel invisible and free. But the freedom was fleeting because she could sense him. Always him. Oleron Blackthorn had learned patience in a way no one else could comprehend. The power to wait, to watch, to measure every heartbeat, every breath, every micro-expression. He observed her from afar, a shadow among the foliage, the golden glint of his eyes hidden beneath a hood, his posture taut, ready to move, yet restrained. Each note he left, folded into a book she had forgotten on the rooftop, slipped under a cafe napkin, or tucked behind a vase in her apartment, was meticulous, calculated, gentle but firm, a silent proof of his presence, a tether pulling her closer without her understanding how it happened. Marielle found one of these notes that night, a simple slip of paper with a single sentence scrawled in exquisite handwriting. "You belong to more than you realize." She laughed nervously, tucking it into her pocket, brushing it off as coincidence. But as the days passed, she noticed the pattern, his gestures, the little signs, the fleeting warmth that reached her in the quietest, most unexpected moments. He was everywhere and nowhere, like a ghost that made her heart ache. Every step she took toward understanding him only deepened the tension. She felt a strange sense of safety in his unseen presence, a magnetism she couldn't explain. Her pulse quickened at the thought, a mix of fear and thrill, because she knew, without a shadow of doubt, that if Oleron ever revealed the full scope of his power, she would be defenseless, consumed. And yet, she didn't want to run. Not entirely. He had begun to intrude subtly into her routines. A coffee cup left at her desk before she arrived, the faint scent of cedar and leather in the elevator when she stepped inside, a single, enigmatic gaze from across a crowded room that lingered too long to be casual. Each gesture sent shivers crawling up her spine, a delicious, dangerous tension that made her stomach twist and her skin flush. The thrill of being observed, of being chosen, of being hunted in this slow, elegant game was addictive. Oleron's wolf stirred beneath his skin. The control was razor-thin now, the restraint bordering on unbearable. He had always been careful, calculating, but the intensity of his obsession with Marielle grew daily. He adjusted his schedule, prioritized her whims and needs, predicted her movements, all without her realizing the extent. Each act was deliberate, a subtle weaving of influence and protection, drawing her ever closer while maintaining the illusion of distance. The hunger to claim, to protect, to dominate his mate battled with his control, and each fleeting encounter, each whispered word, each almost touch made the restraint more torturous. Marielle began noticing small things others would overlook. The way he lingered just outside her peripheral vision, unseen but felt. The way his presence seemed to wrap around the space she occupied, a magnetic force tethering her without chains. The way her chest rose and fell faster when he was near, even when she convinced herself he wasn't. There was an unspoken promise in his silence, a pull that transcended words, a language written in glances, in careful distances, in subtle attention. One night, she paused in the rooftop garden, the city lights below painting her in golds and blues, shadows stretching across her face. She sensed him, close, but not visible, and her pulse jumped. A single note lay in her hand, folded neatly, waiting. It read, "I will not leave you alone. Not now, not ever." Her hands trembled slightly. She couldn't explain why, but the words resonated, echoing through her very core. There was comfort here, yes, but also danger. The allure of the alpha, the pull of someone who could devour her in a single motion, was intoxicating. Every instinct screamed caution, every desire whispered surrender. She was caught in the friction between fear and fascination, and it burned with a heat she could neither deny nor fully understand. The nights blurred Tog. Esley, in the way shadows fell across her path. Every gesture, every watchful pause, every fleeting interaction was a message. I am yours to notice, but you may not yet understand why. Marielle's mind was a whirlwind of questions, each answered only partially, always leaving her wanting more. She realized the thrill wasn't merely in the notes or the gestures. It was in the ambiguity, the tantalizing unknown. Every evening spent on the rooftops, every stolen glance, every almost encounter drew her deeper into the orbit of a man she both feared and desired with a depth that startled her. And Oleron from the shadows felt it too, the pull, the tension, the undeniable magnetic thread binding them. His wolf wanted her utterly, to claim her as mate, to ensure nothing could ever touch her or sway her from his side. Yet he restrained himself, understanding that obsession without control would destroy what he sought to protect. Each step closer, each subtle intrusion, each careful gesture was a balance between desire and dominance, patience and obsession, love and possession. The chemistry simmered silently, a slow burn in the modern cityscape, electrifying yet invisible to everyone but them. The thrill of danger intertwined with a pull of romance, creating a rhythm of tension and anticipation that neither could resist. The world outside could wait. In these moments, it was just the two of them, one hiding in plain sight, the other unknowingly drawn into the snare of a powerful, all-consuming fascination. Her heart is already racing, and yours should be too. Subscribe now or tell us in the comments why you walked away from this forbidden pull. Don't leave before you feel the fire between them ignite completely. Rain streaked the tall glass windows of the library, tapping out a rhythm that mirrored the quickening beat of Marielle's heart. The room smelled of old parchment, polished wood, and something more, something intangible, lingering in the space like a secret. Her fingers brushed along the spines of books, pretending to read titles, but every instinct screamed that she wasn't alone. She could feel him before she saw him. Oleron Blackthorn, the Alpha, the man whose power whispered through the air, whose presence made the walls of the library shrink around her, folding the world into a private, charged space. Alairon's eyes followed her from the shadows, calculating, observing, absorbing. There was a tension in the air, invisible yet palpable, that twisted around her chest and settled there, warm and insistent. His wolf stirred at the subtle cues she emitted, the defiance she could not hide, the tremor of unease in her hands, the faint scent of fear mingled with strength that only an alpha could perceive. He knew, instinctively, that she was more than the useless girl her family had painted her to be. And in that knowledge, a hunger awakened, primal, demanding, patient yet insistent. Their first accidental touch was electric. Alairon reached for a book on the top shelf, and his arm brushed hers. The contact was brief, but the sparks that shot through her veins refused to fade. Her breath caught, shallow and quick, and her pulse thundered in a way that betrayed her own awareness of the attraction simmering between them. She tried to step back, to regain control, but the pull was undeniable. He noticed it too, his gaze darkened, almost feral, and yet tempered with a careful restraint. His wolf growled softly beneath the surface, a low vibration that resonated with his every heartbeat, but Alairon remained composed, the mask of the billionaire alpha in place. Marielle's mind raced. What was this feeling that pricked at her defenses, that made her pulse skip and her thoughts scatter? Every glance from him seemed to read her, to peel away layers she had spent a lifetime building. She felt seen, truly seen, and it was terrifying and intoxicating at once. There was a pull in her chest, a magnetic draw she had no language for, an undeniable compulsion to inch closer, to let herself be noticed, even if danger lingered beneath it all. Alairon stepped closer under the pretense of examining a title on a lower shelf. The air between them thickened, charged with an almost tangible electricity. Their fingers nearly touched again, hovering in a silent, unspoken dialogue. Her breath trembled, caught somewhere between fear, fascination, and desire. He leaned just enough that she caught the subtle scent of cedar, leather, and something primal, his essence, uncontainable, yet refined, dangerous, yet magnetic. It wrapped around her, sinking into her senses, and she felt her wolf responding, her instincts attuning to his in a dance older than time. He spoke then, low and deliberate, the tone of his voice a velvet caress that contrasted with the raw power simmering beneath it. "You are not as small as they say," he murmured, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath brush her temple. The words were simple, yet they cut deeper than any insult her family had thrown at her. They held weight, attention, recognition, and in that acknowledgement, something stirred within her. Something alive, something hungry. Every glance, every near touch, every careful step forward was a test of restraint and revelation. Alairon's wolf itched to claim her scent, to mark her as his, to ensure that no one else could ever touch what he considered undeniably his. But he held back, walking the fine line between obsession and control. He wanted her to choose him willingly, to feel the same compulsion that he felt without forcing her into it. And that subtle restraint made her curiosity, her desire, burn even hotter. Marielle could feel the chemistry wrapping around her like smoke, intangible yet suffocating in its intensity. She noticed the small things. The way his eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary, the imperceptible shift in his stance when she moved closer, the way his focus never wavered from her presence. It was unnerving, thrilling, and utterly consuming. She found herself seeking these moments, craving them, though every rational thought told her to flee. And yet, she stayed. Because some part of her knew that this was inevitable, that her life had been quietly orchestrated to collide with his, to awaken something deep, wild, and untamed inside both of them. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing harder against the windows, lightning flaring and casting fleeting shadows that danced across the polished wood floors. It mirrored the tension in the room. Marielle's heartbeat racing, Alairon's controlled but simmering power, the silent, almost dangerous rhythm between them. She dared to look at him, and in that moment, she saw it. the wolf beneath the man, restrained but restless, a predator tempered by desire. And yet he did not strike. He waited, watched, measured, creating a tension that was almost unbearable, a delicious torment she could not escape. Time became a blur, measured only in breaths and glances. Every accidental brush of his hand, every shared space, every almost encounter left her aching, wanting more, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. She felt him, the pull of his presence, the heat of his obsession, the invisible tether binding them together. And every instinct screamed that once that tether tightened, there would be no escape, no turning back. The city hummed far below, neon lights flickering like distant stars against the glass walls of Oleron's penthouse. Inside, the world felt smaller, contained, a space where time bent to the rhythm of two hearts that barely understood the gravity of their connection. Marielle stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, the wind tugging at strands of her hair, brushing against her cheek as if teasing her with a promise she wasn't ready to acknowledge. And then she saw it. Flashes that weren't quite human, hints of movement in his eyes that betrayed a feral grace beneath the polished veneer. Oleron's wolf was awake, and it was aware of her, alert to her presence, restless with curiosity and something darker, something possessive. She felt it, too, an invisible thread, vibrating through her chest, pulling her closer even when her rational mind screamed to retreat. Her pulse quickened, her hands trembling slightly against the glass. Every instinct told her to run, but some deeper, older instinct, the part of her that had always felt separate, unseen, overlooked, recognized the pull as something inevitable, something that had been waiting for her long before she could name it. Oleron moved beside her, quiet, deliberate, his presence overwhelming yet careful, as though he knew the fragility of the line they were walking. "You've been here before," he murmured, voice low, a velvet echo that caressed the edges of her mind. "In dreams. In fragments you can't remember, but your soul remembers." Marielle turned to him, heart catching in her throat. He was close enough that she could see the faint glint of gold in his eyes, fleeting, wolfish, undeniable. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch, her body respond in ways she didn't fully understand. She wanted to flee, but there was no door out, not of this room, not of the pull that he had ignited within her. "You see it too," he said, almost a whisper, almost a question. "The threads that tie us, that have always tied us. You can't fight it, Marielle. You can try." But his hand hovered near hers, so close that the space between them seemed charged with static. Her fingers itched to reach for him, to bridge the distance, yet fear rooted her to the spot. Fear of losing herself to a man who was both human and something more, whose wolf pulsed with a power that could consume or protect in equal measure. Every subtle movement, every fleeting glance, deepened the tension. Oleron stepped slightly closer, not threatening, but claiming a portion of her attention, a piece of the space she had thought belonged only to herself. She noticed the careful control in his posture, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw as his wolf responded to her, as the bond between them flickered into something neither could deny. She wanted to pull back, and yet every instinct that had been numbed by years of her family's judgment screamed forward. This was real. This connection was undeniable. Their shared past, visions, dreams, fragments of another life she could not name, wove between them like a secret language. Marielle realized with a mix of awe and trepidation that her soul recognized him before her mind could comprehend it. Oleron's presence stirred memories she had never lived consciously, yet felt in the marrow of her bones. It was a pulse so ancient, so primal, it left her trembling with uncertainty and longing. She tried to focus on the small details, the texture of the polished floor beneath her feet, the smell of rain on the terrace beyond the glass, the distant hum of the city, but nothing could hold her attention. Her awareness had contracted entirely to him, to the rhythm of his presence, to the latent power lurking beneath his composed exterior. Every micro-expression, every shift in his stance, Every careful movement was a conversation in its own right, speaking volumes that words could never capture. Alairon's wolf pressed against the edges of his control, sensing her fragility, her defiance, her potential. The subtle scent of fear and desire emanated from her in waves that he could not ignore. He restrained himself, but only enough to let her come to him willingly, to ensure that the bond formed would be mutual. He wanted her not as a possession, but as a choice. And that choice, that tiny spark of her own volition, made his obsession with her deepen, sharpening it into something exquisite, almost unbearable in its intensity. Marielle's mind was a battleground of conflicting emotions, terror at the unknown power before her, fascination at the glimpses of what lay beneath his polished surface, desire for the safety and thrill his presence offered, and a gnawing curiosity about the connection that tied their souls together. Every breath she drew was shallow, anticipating his next movement, the subtle brushing of proximity, the weight of his gaze that anchored her to this moment. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the skyline in stark bursts, casting fleeting shadows that danced across Alairon's face. For a heartbeat, she saw the wolf in his eyes without filter, pure, untamed, aware of her in ways no human could be. Her heart pounded so violently she was sure he could hear it, and perhaps he did, his attention zeroed in on the tremors of fear and longing that she could not mask. Alairon spoke again, softer now, more intimate. "You are not what they say you are. You never were. I see it, your strength, your fire, your truth. And I will not let anyone diminish it, especially not you." The words landed like a warm hand on a frozen place in her chest. For the first time in her life, someone of such magnitude, someone so commanding, so dangerous, acknowledged her, validated her, and wanted her for who she truly was, not for the image her family had tried to force upon the world. Marielle exhaled, almost imperceptibly, a tremor running through her body. She felt the tension between them swell, thick and suffocating, like the charged air before a storm breaks. Her wolf stirred in response, recognizing the call of his, feeling the potential for a bond that could transcend the physical, the emotional, the temporal. She wanted to run, yes, but she also wanted to step forward, to reach out, to acknowledge that she had been waiting for this, the pull, the connection, the inevitability. If you leave now, you'll never know what destiny was waiting for her. Subscribe before the next secret unfolds, or admit in the comments why you walked away. Marielle had begun to notice the subtle shifts in her world, little details she couldn't explain, but that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't yet understand. A lingering shadow at her apartment entrance, a shadow that vanished the instant she looked directly, the sudden protection in situations that should have been mundane. A minor accident prevented at the last second, a stranger stepping back just as she passed. Her curiosity mixed with unease. Someone was orchestrating events around her, and every instinct whispered that it wasn't coincidence. Alairon, from the comfort of his penthouse or the shadows of the city streets, observed her like a hunter who had discovered not prey, but a treasure he could not let slip through his fingers. His wolf growled quietly beneath his control when she brushed past danger unknowingly, when her laughter reached him carried on a late-night breeze, when her scent, the mix of fear, defiance, and unrecognized strength, danced teasingly at the edge of his consciousness. He could not contain the pull she had on him, nor did he want to. It was intoxicating, consuming, and utterly forbidden. He began leaving small signs of his presence, subtle marks only she might notice. A note tucked into the pages of a book she had set aside, a door left slightly ajar that he had closed for her without comment, a hand silently steadying her when a balcony railing wobbled underfoot. Each act seemed random, insignificant, and yet they carried an almost imperceptible message. I am here. You are mine, even before you realize it. Marielle felt it. This invisible tether. Part of her mind screamed caution, warning her to flee, to resist. She knew better than to be drawn in by a man whose power eclipsed her own, whose eyes held the weight of a wolf whose instincts could consume the unwary. And yet, there was a fascination in her chest she could not deny, a heat that rose every time she sensed him nearby. She couldn't rationalize it, but she wanted it. She wanted him. It was during one of these ordinary moments that the tension became undeniable. She had been walking through a rain-slicked city street, the neon reflections in puddles stretching like molten glass beneath her feet, when a shadow fell across her path. A group of men loitered too close, their intent unclear but menacing. Marielle's heart thudded painfully against her ribs, fear rising sharply. And then, as if summoned, Oleron appeared, silent, unassuming, yet radiating a force so potent that the men faltered instinctively. A brush of his presence, a tilt of his head, and the air itself seemed to bend, warning of the consequences of crossing him. The men left, murmuring excuses that sounded hollow even to themselves. Marielle's knees felt weak, and she realized she had been holding her breath. Oleron stepped close, not touching her, but close enough that the warmth radiating from him brushed her skin. His golden eyes, wolfish and commanding, met hers. For the first time, she recognized the full depth of his obsession, not a casual curiosity, not idle interest, but a profound, consuming fixation. He would protect her. Not because she asked, not because she knew, but because he could not allow harm to touch her. "Do you see now?" he asked softly, voice a low rumble, resonating with both human control and wolf instinct. "This world, this city, there are dangers you cannot even imagine. And yet you walk it alone. Not for long. Not when I am here." Marielle swallowed hard. His words were not a threat. They were a promise, and that promise sent shivers down her spine. She felt drawn to him, irrationally, instinctively, despite every warning etched into her mind. She wanted to deny it, to resist, but her body and her soul recognized a truth that had existed long before either of them had acknowledged it. She was tethered to him in ways that transcended reason. As days passed, she began noticing more. The subtle rearrangement of her schedule to match his, the unspoken protection in situations she hadn't even realized were dangerous. Her admiration grew into fascination, fascination into something more, a thrilling mixture of fear and longing that she could not name. Her thoughts became tangled with him, her dreams were threaded with him. Even in her quietest moments, his presence pressed against the edges of her mind, like the persistent thrum of a drumbeat she could not ignore. The psychological tension was a heady mix. She should have distrusted him, she should have fled, but every encounter, every brush of attention, left her wanting more. She noticed how his control slipped in tiny, almost imperceptible ways when she challenged him, teased him, or met his gaze without fear. The powerful alpha, feared by human and wolf alike, was vulnerable when it came to her, and that realization both terrified and exhilarated her. The obsession was mutual. Oleron's wolf urged him forward, demanded that he claim her, guard her, mark her as his own. But he restrained himself, letting her approach, letting her wonder, letting the pull between them thicken into something unavoidable. The restraint itself added a charged tension to every interaction, a simmering heat that Marielle could feel, could not ignore, could not resist. It wasn't just physical proximity. It was the knowledge that he had orchestrated moments to ensure her safety, to be near her without exposing the depths of his power. That subtle manipulation, his careful weaving of events to draw her closer, created a psychological pull that she couldn't name, that she couldn't fight, and that deepened the emotional connection in ways that no words could fully capture. Every glance became a conversation. Every accidental touch carried weight. Every orchestrated coincidence he left at her path was a thread binding her. Man she could not resist, a man who was as dangerous as he was irresistible. The tension reached its peak one evening on the rooftop garden of his penthouse. Rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavy, and the city below shimmered in wet reflections. Marielle was alone, thinking she was safe, when a whisper of movement behind her made her heart jump. He stepped into view, water droplets clinging to his hair and clothing, his gaze melting her defenses with the weight of an unspoken obsession. "You don't see it yet," he murmured, voice low, charged. "But you will. And when you do, there will be no going back. You will want this even when your mind tells you not to. And I will make sure you have it, whether you know it or not." She looked at him, rain dripping down her face, eyes wide with awe, fear, and longing all at once. The pull was undeniable. The obsession that drove him, the protection he offered, the subtle yet persistent domination of her world. It all created a web she had no choice but to step into, willingly or not. Her heart is caught, and now yours is too. Don't leave before the obsession deepens. Subscribe now, or tell us in the comments why you walked away, and include the country you're watching from. The chandelier lights fractured like 1,000 tiny stars trapped in crystal, casting a golden haze over the private gala's ballroom. Marielle Voss felt the weight of silk against her skin, the gown her family had chosen clinging like a second shadow, forcing her into this glittering cage of high society. Whispers rippled through the crowd, names like currency, alliances forged in champagne toasts, but her pulse hammered for one reason alone. Aleron Blackthorn was here, and the air thickened the moment his gaze found her. She spotted him across the room, a tower of restrained power in a tailored tuxedo that hugged his frame like it knew his secrets. His golden eyes locked on hers, not predatory yet, but probing, pulling her in without a word. Marielle's breath snagged. She wanted to turn away, to melt into the anonymous swirl of guests, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her closer, as if an invisible current dragged her forward. Her family had orchestrated this, another arrangement to cement their status, but they couldn't see the storm brewing beneath her calm facade, the fear twisting with a forbidden spark of want. Aleron watched her approach, his wolf pacing restlessly inside, scenting her nervousness like fresh rain on earth. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to close the distance himself, to shield her from the prying eyes that didn't deserve her. She was his puzzle, his flame, and every second of restraint carved deeper into his control. The human in him whispered patience, let her come, let her choose, but the alpha snarled, demanding he claim what fate had already bound. "Marielle," he said as she drew near, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her chest, intimate amid the orchestra's swell. No greeting, just her name, like a confession. She stopped inches away, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, her hand brushing his sleeve in the accidental press of the crowd. Electricity shot up her arm, sharp and unbidden, making her fingers curl involuntarily. She pulled back, but not before his eyes darkened, registering the touch like a spark to dry tinder. "I didn't expect you here," she lied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her core. Vulnerability clawed at her. Submitting to this pull meant losing the scraps of independence she'd fought for, yet craving it felt like breathing after too long underwater. Aleron's lips twitched, almost a smile, but his gaze held steady, seeing through her walls to the raw ache beneath. "You did," he murmured, leaning in just enough that his breath goes to her ear. "And that's what terrifies you." A whispered warning, laced with empathy, as if he understood her internal war better than she did. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but the air between their fingers hummed with possibility. Marielle's heart stuttered. She feared the surrender, the way his presence eroded her defenses, but God, the connection called to her like a forgotten melody, stirring parts of her soul she'd buried deep. The music shifted, a waltz unfurling like silk threads, and the crowd parted for the dance floor. Aleron extended his hand, palm up, an invitation wrapped in command. "Dance with me," he said, not a question, but his eyes softened, revealing a flicker of vulnerability, the alpha honoring her pace, even as his wolf strained against the leash. Marielle hesitated, her mind screaming retreat, but her body betrayed her again, placing her hand in his. His fingers closed gently, warm and firm, sending a jolt that pooled low in her belly. They moved into the flow, bodies almost touching, the space between them a torturous inch of charged air. Alairon led with effortless precision, his free hand resting lightly at her waist, not possessive yet, but hinting at it. Marielle felt every shift, every brush of fabric, her skin hypersensitive to his proximity. Fear warred with craving. Submission meant vulnerability, opening herself to a man who could shatter her, but the connection, raw, human, electric, whispered promises of belonging she'd never known. His wolf sensed her conflict, the subtle quicken of her pulse, the faint tremble in her frame. It took everything in Alairon not to pull her flesh against him, to let the beast mark her scent right there amid the oblivious elite. Instead, he whispered, "You're fighting this, but why?" "I see you, Marielle, the real you, not the shadow they made." Empathy threaded his words, a bridge to her isolation, deepening the bond with every step. She met his gaze, golden eyes reflecting her turmoil back at her. "Because trusting you means losing myself," she confessed, voice barely above the strings. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw, pushing them closer emotionally even as their bodies maintained that agonizing almost touch. Alairon's grip tightened fractionally, his human side aching to reassure, while his wolf howled for more. The dance spun them through the room, lights blurring into streaks, the atmosphere thick with unspoken desires. Marielle's fear ebbed slightly, replaced by a tentative craving. The way his presence filled her voids made her feel seen, not useless. Internal conflict raged, submit and risk heartbreak, or resist and deny the fire igniting in her veins. Alairon felt it too, his restraint fraying as her scent enveloped him, sweet with budding trust. As the music crested, he drew her a hair's breadth closer, their chests nearly brushing. "Let me show you," he breathed, a plea wrapped in warning. Her hand grazed a shoulder, intentional this time, sending sparks that made her gasp softly. The connection deepened, empathy flowing between them like shared breath, vulnerability exposed in the sway of their bodies. The waltz ended, but they lingered, hands still linked, the gala's hum fading to white noise. Marielle's craving outweighed her fear now, a subtle shift that Alairon's wolf detected instantly. He released her hand slowly, fingers trailing hers in a final graze that promised more. "This isn't over," he said, voice husky with restrained hunger. She nodded, heart pounding, the internal battle tilting toward surrender. Not full, not yet, but enough to hook her deeper into his orbit. Shadows lengthened as the gala wound down, guests trickling out like fading echoes, but Marielle couldn't leave. Alairon's presence anchored her, a magnetic force she circled without touching. He guided her to a quieter alcove, away from the dwindling crowd, where velvet curtains muffled the world. The air here was heavier, scented with aged wine and faint jasmine from nearby blooms, amplifying the tension coiling between them. "You feel it too," he said, standing close, his frame blocking the exit, not trapping but sheltering. Marielle's breath came shallow, her fingers itching to reach out, to test the solidity of him. Fear of submission lingered, a sharp edge in her mind, but the craving for connection bloomed warmer, more insistent. "It's like, I've been waiting without knowing," she admitted, vulnerability cracking her voice, drawing them into deeper empathy. Alairon's wolf paced harder, scenting her shift, but he honored her pace, leaning against the wall to give her space. "I've waited longer," he confessed, golden eyes softening with raw honesty. "But I won't push. Not until you're ready." The struggle etched his features. The alpha's instinct to claim warring with the man's respect for her autonomy. It humanized him, made the connection feel mutual, not imposed. She stepped closer, hand grazing his arm again, deliberate now. The touch ignited physical tension, her skin flushing under his gaze. Internal conflict swirled, crave the safety in his strength, or fear the loss of self. But his empathy mirrored hers, a shared vulnerability that bound them tighter. "Tell me why me," she whispered, pushing the scene forward, deepening their emotional tie. "Because you challenge me," he replied, voice rough. "You make the wolf quiet and roar." His hand rose, hovering near her cheek, almost touching, the air crackling. Marielle leaned in fractionally, craving overriding fear, the atmosphere electric with unspoken promises. They stood like that, breaths sinking, the gala's distant laughter a reminder of the world outside their bubble. Aleron's restraint held, but barely, his jaw tight as his wolf demanded contact. Marielle felt the pull, her internal walls crumbling under the weight of genuine connection, empathy for his struggle, vulnerability in admitting her own. As midnight bells tolled faintly, she broke the stasis, her fingers brushing his in a tentative link. "Show me slowly," she said, a concession that hooked them both deeper. Aleron's eyes flashed gold, relief and hunger mingling, his human side triumphant over the beast for now. The alcove's dim light played across their faces, highlighting the subtle shifts, Marielle's softened posture, Aleron's controlled tension. She traced his palm with her thumb, a small act that sent ripples through him, his wolf settling slightly at the voluntary touch. Fear still whispered in her mind. Submission could mean erasure, but the craving for this raw, human bond overpowered it, empathy flowing as she sensed his internal battle. "You're stronger than you know," he murmured, thumb mirroring hers in a graze that deepened the physical pull. The atmosphere thickened, jasmine mingling with his cedar scent, immersive and intimate. Marielle's heart ached with vulnerability, but it felt right, pushing her toward trust. He pulled back slightly, honoring her unspoken boundaries, but the separation only heightened the tension. "Walk with me," he offered, extending his arm. Not commanding, but inviting. She took it, arm linking with his, the contact steadying her internal storm. As they moved through the emptying ballroom, guests casting curious glances, the connection solidified, empathy in every step, vulnerability shared in silence. Outside, the night air kissed her skin, city lights pulsing like a living heartbeat. Aleron's presence beside her felt protective, not oppressive, his wolf content with proximity. Marielle's craving grew, fear receding as she leaned into the empathy between them. The understanding that both fought their demons. They strolled along the venue's terrace, overlooking the glittering skyline, wind whispering secrets. "What scares you most?" she asked, voice soft, deepening their tie. Aleron paused, golden eyes meeting hers. "Losing control and hurting you." Raw vulnerability, a confession that hooked her empathy, making the connection irreversible. Her hand squeezed his arm, a silent reassurance, physical tension building in the subtle pressure. Internal conflict eased for her, craving won, submission feeling like strength in his presence. Aleron's struggle mirrored hers, his human side prevailing, restraint a gift to her pace. The terrace's edge loomed, stars above mirroring the city's glow, atmosphere vast yet intimate. Marielle turned to him, faces inches apart, breaths mingling. "I'm not ready to submit," she said, honest, vulnerable. "But I want this us." The words pushed them forward, deepening the emotional web. Aleron's fingers grazed her jaw, light as a feather, his wolf howling internally but held back. "Then we'll build it together," he promised, empathy shining in his gaze. The touch lingered, electric, as fear dissolved into craving, connection forging unbreakable in the night's embrace. Moonlight filtered through the terrace's glass roof, casting ethereal patterns on the stone floor, turning the space into a private sanctuary amid the gala's remnants. Marielle felt exposed yet safe, her arms still linked with Aleron's, the warmth of him seeping through fabric to skin. Her internal conflict simmered, fear of losing autonomy clashing with the undeniable crave for his steadying presence, but each moment deepened the empathy, making vulnerability feel like a shared strength. He stopped at a bench overlooking the drop to the city below, gesturing for her to sit. She did, and he joined her, close but not crowding, his thigh brushing hers in accidental proximity that sent a thrill up her spine. The atmosphere hummed with unsaid words, wind carrying faint music from inside, immersive and isolating them further. "Tell me about your family," he said, voice gentle, probing not to wound but to understand. Marielle hesitated, vulnerability rising like bile, but his empathetic gaze coaxed it out. They saw me as disposable, useless weight. The admission hurt, but sharing it with him lightened the load, pushing their connection deeper. Aleron's jaw tightened, Wolf stirring at her pain, but he reached for her hand, grazing knuckles in reassurance. They're blind. I see fire in you, Marielle, resilience that matches mine. His words wrapped around her, empathy mirroring her hurt, vulnerability in admitting his own admiration. Physical tension built in the held hand, fingers intertwining slowly, deliberately. She squeezed back, craving the anchor, fear ebbing as trust trickled in. And you? What chains your wolf? Bold, pushing forward, deepening the intimacy. Aleron's eyes flashed gold briefly, struggle evident. The fear of overwhelming what I cherish. Honoring your pace, it's my hardest battle. Raw confession, human side bared, hooking her empathy tighter. The wind picked up, tousling her hair, and he tucked a strand behind her ear, fingers grazing her cheek in a touch that lingered. Electric tension sparked, her pulse racing, internal conflict tilting fully toward craving. Submission no longer loomed as loss, but as mutual vulnerability. They sat in silence, hands linked, atmosphere charged with growing connection. Marielle leaned her head on his shoulder, a small surrender that made his wolf purr internally, restraint holding as he wrapped an arm around her loosely. Empathy flowed, understanding each other's scars, building trust brick by brick. As dawn hinted at the horizon, tinting the sky pink, she lifted her head, meeting his gaze. This scares me, but I don't want to stop. Vulnerability shared, pushing the scene to new depths. Aleron nodded, golden eyes warm. Neither do I. We'll navigate it together. The promise sealed their bond, physical tension humming in the almost embrace, internal struggles aligning in harmony. Velvet darkness clung to the terrace as they rose, the city's pulse slowing with the approaching dawn. Marielle's hand remained in Aleron's, a lifeline amid her swirling emotions, fear lingering like a shadow, but craving blooming brighter, connection forging empathy that felt profound, human. He led her back inside, through empty halls echoing with faded laughter, atmosphere shifting to quiet intimacy. At the elevator, he pressed the button, turning to her. Let me take you home, he offered, voice low, honoring her choice. She nodded, vulnerability and accepting, deepening their tie. The door slid open, and they stepped in, bodies close in the confined space, physical tension thickening as mirrors reflected their almost touching forms. Descending, silence wrapped them, but empathy spoke volumes, his glance catching hers, understanding her internal war. Marielle's fingers tightened in his, craving overriding fear, submission feeling like empowerment in his presence. Aleron's wolf calmed at her initiative, human side relieved. The lobby loomed, cool marble underfoot, and he guided her to his car waiting curbside. Sliding into the leather seats, the engine's purr vibrated through her, immersive atmosphere of luxury and closeness. As he drove, city lights streaking past, conversation flowed, vulnerable shares of past pains, empathetic responses building layers to their connection. Arriving at her building, he parked, turning to her. Good night, Marielle, he said, hand grazing her knee in farewell. Electric spark, tension peaking. She leaned in, lips brushing his cheek, a bold move, craving winning. Thank you, she whispered, internal conflict resolved for the night. He watched her enter, wolf urging pursuit, but restraint held. The connection deepened, empathy and vulnerability their foundation, hooking them into inevitable futures. But the pull didn't end at her door. Days blurred into a rhythm of subtle encounters, each building on the gala's foundation. Marielle found notes again, but now they felt like extensions of their shared vulnerability. Words of encouragement slipped into her bag, empathetic reminders of her strength. Fear still nipped at her heels, but craving for his presence grew, connection feeling like a warm hearth in her cold world. Aleron struggled daily, Wolf demanding more proximity, but he honored her pace, arranging coincidental meetings that allowed empathy to flourish. A coffee shop run-in, hands grazing over cups, physical tension reigniting. "You look tired," he observed, voice soft. "Let me help." Vulnerability and offering, deepening their bond. She accepted, sharing her day's burdens, empathy flowing as he listened, internal conflict easing with each word. The atmosphere of the bustling cafe faded, immersive focus on their table, connection strengthening. Nights brought dreams, vivid, wolf-tinged visions where fear and craving intertwined, pushing her toward acceptance. Waking, she'd text him, vulnerability in midnight confessions, his responses empathetic anchors. One evening, rain pounding the windows of her apartment, he appeared at her door unannounced but welcome. "I felt you needed me," he said, golden eyes searching. Physical tension crackled as she let him in, bodies close in the narrow hall. They talked for hours, seated on her couch, hands almost touching. Internal conflict raged in her, submit to the pull or hold back. But his empathy, his restraint, tipped the scale. "I crave this too," he admitted, vulnerability bared, Wolf struggling beneath. She bridged the gap, fingers linking with his, craving triumphant. The touch deepened everything. Empathy, connection, tension. Atmosphere thick with rain's drum, immersive and intimate. As lightning flashed, illuminating their faces, she whispered, "I'm ready to try." A forward push, internal fears subdued by growing trust. Oleron's eyes softened, human side honoring, wolf content. Their connection evolved, vulnerability shared in quiet moments, empath. Marielle's internal world shifted, submission no longer terrified, but enticed, connection with Oleron feeling like destiny. He, too, found peace in honoring her pace, Wolf learning patience through empathy. A park walk under autumn leaves, hands linked, atmosphere crisp and alive. "You've changed me," he confessed, vulnerability raw. She smiled, squeezing his hand. "And you've shown me strength." Deepening tie, pushing forward. Physical tension simmered in every glance, every graze, but restraint held, making craving sweeter. Internal conflicts resolved, connection profound. The rooftop garden where it began called them back one night, stars overhead, city below. Standing close, almost touching, Marielle turned to him. "I don't fear this anymore." Vulnerability and admission, craving clear. Oleron's hand cupped her cheek, thumb grazing, electric. "Then let it be," he murmured, leaning in. Their lips met, soft, tentative, then deepening with empathy and passion. Wolf and woman aligned, connection sealed. The kiss broke, breaths mingling, tension released yet renewed. Internal worlds merged, fear gone, craving fulfilled. They stood embraced, atmosphere magical, hooked eternally. But obsessions deepen, and theirs was no exception. Oleron's protection intensified subtly, shadowing her commutes, ensuring safety without intrusion. Marielle sensed it, empathy making it feel caring, not controlling. Vulnerability shared in discussions. "I worry," he admitted. "Let me guard you." She nodded, craving the security, internal balance found. Physical proximity increased. Dinners where hands grazed under tables, tension building. A weekend escape to his countryside estate, atmosphere shifting to rural serenity, immersive woods calling to his wolf. They walked trails, hands linked, connection deepening with nature's backdrop. By a stream, he shifted partially, eyes gold, form taut, vulnerability in revealing. "This is me." Marielle touched his face, fear absent, craving strong. "I see you," she said, empathy profound. The struggle for him eased, human and wolf harmonizing through her acceptance. Internal conflict gone, bond unbreakable. Back in the city, challenges tested them, her family's interference, demanding she sever ties. Fear resurfaced, but craving for Oleron overpowered. "We face it together," he promised, empathy anchoring. Confrontation in the family home. Alaron by her side. Physical tension in his protective stance. Vulnerability in her stand. He's my choice. Connection triumphed, deepening their tie. Nights of passion followed, almost touches evolving to full embraces, tension released in waves. Atmosphere intimate, immersive, sense, sounds, emotions vivid. Yet restraint lingered in Alaron, honoring her fully. When you're ready for forever, he whispered. Marielle's craving peaked, internal readiness complete. Under a full moon, on the penthouse terrace, she whispered. Now. He claimed her gently, wolf marking soul to soul, connection eternal. Thunder cracked like a whip across the sky, shaking the penthouse windows as if the storm outside sensed the chaos brewing within. Marielle Voss stood frozen in the vast living room, her fingers gripping the edge of a marble countertop, heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. Whispers from rival shifters had slithered into her world, threats scrawled in anonymous notes, hints of exposure that could unravel everything she'd built with Alaron. And now, her family hovered like vultures, manipulated by jealous socialites who saw her as the weak link in Alaron's armor. Alaron burst through the door, rain-slicked hair plastered to his forehead, golden eyes blazing with a fury that made the air thicken. He scanned the room, locking on her instantly, his wolf sensing her distress before words could form. Marielle, he growled low, crossing the space in 3 strides, his hand reaching for hers but stopping short, respecting the storm in her eyes. She pulled back, vulnerability crashing over her. How could she trust this bond when enemies circled, using her past as a weapon? The penthouse felt smaller, walls pressing in under the weight of the downpour outside, lightning flashing to illuminate the tension etched on their faces. Marielle's family lingered in the shadows, her mother's lips pursed in disapproval, her father's voice cutting through the rumble. This ends now. Those shifters say you're a liability. Expose us all. Manipulation dripped from his words, fed by socialites who'd whispered poisons of doubt, jealous of the alpha's devotion to a useless girl. Alaron's jaw tightened, his wolf snarling internally, but he turned to them, voice steady yet laced with lethal calm. You don't get to decide. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Marielle and her kin, a public shield that screamed devotion without a touch. Her heart twisted. Fear of exposure clawed at her. But seeing him stand there, unyielding, sparked a recognition. His obsession wasn't chains. It was armor, protective and fierce. Rain hammered the glass, mirroring the chaos in Marielle's mind, internal conflict raging as old wounds reopened. Vulnerability flooded her. She'd always been the outsider, but Alaron's stance made her feel claimed in the best way, not owned but guarded. Why fight for me? She whispered, voice breaking, pushing him to reveal more, deepening the raw connection amid the storm. He turned to her, golden eyes softening just for her, empathy shining through the fury. Because you're my world. They threaten you. They threaten me. The words hung heavy, physical tension building as his hand finally grazed hers, a spark that grounded her amid the turmoil. Her family scoffed, but Alaron's wolf pressed against his control, ready to unleash if needed, yet he held back, for her. Jealous socialites had woven their web tight, leaking rumors to shifters who saw Alaron's mate as a vulnerability to exploit. One rival, a sleek wolf named Valeria, had cornered Marielle earlier that day, hissing threats in a crowded cafe. He'll tire of protecting your fragile human heart. The memory fueled Marielle's fear, but Alaron's presence now eroded it, his devotion a beacon in the dark. Lightning split the sky again, casting stark shadows that danced across the room, atmosphere electric with unspoken battles. Marielle's mother stepped forward, manipulated strings pulling her words. She's not one of you. End this before it destroys us. The accusation stung, deepening Marielle's internal wound, feeling useless again, vulnerable under their gaze. Alaron's response was swift, voice booming over the thunder. She's more than any of you see. And I'll protect her with everything. Public declaration, devotion laid bare, his wolf's growl underscoring the promise. Mariel's breath caught, recognition dawning. His obsession was love's fierce guardian, not a cage. Empathy surged between them. He felt her pain, mirrored it in his stance. Physical tension coiled as he pulled her closer, arm wrapping around her waist, not possessive but supportive. Her body leaned into him instinctively, craving the safety amid chaos. Internal conflict peaked. Resist the pull and face threats alone, or embrace his protection and deepen their bond. The storm outside roared approval as she chose, hand pressing against his chest, feeling his heartbeat sync with hers. Rivals weren't done. A phone buzzed, anonymous text flashing threats of exposure. Mariel's family secrets twisted to paint her as bait. Her father's eyes widened, manipulation cracking his facade. "They'll ruin us," he muttered, but Alairon snatched the device, crushing it in his fist, symbolic destruction pushing the confrontation forward. "You think threats scare me?" Alairon snarled, turning to Mariel, vulnerability in his eyes only she could see. "I won't let them touch you." The words deepened their connection, her fear transforming into trust, recognizing the protective depth of his obsession. Atmosphere thickened, rain blurring the city lights outside, immersive isolation in their shared storm. She faced her family, voice steady for the first time. "I'm not your pawn anymore." Empowerment surged, Alairon's devotion fueling her strength, emotional tie tightening. Her mother recoiled, jealousy from socialites whispers evident in her glare, but Mariel stood tall, vulnerability turning to resilience. Thunder rolled closer, shaking the foundations, mirroring the shift in power. Alairon's wolf sensed victory, but he whispered to her alone, "We're in this together." Empathy wrapped around her, human connection overriding the beast's instincts, deepening their bond beyond words. As her family retreated, tails between legs, the penthouse exhaled, storm easing slightly outside. Mariel turned to him fully, hands framing his face, physical tension humming. "I see it now, your obsession, it's us." Recognition complete, romantic payoff in her eyes, protective love acknowledged. He kissed her forehead, restraint breaking in that gentle touch, wolf content. Internal chaos settled, connection profound, hooked in mutual devotion. But peace was fragile, whispers from rivals lingered, testing their newfound unity. Days later, in the quiet of dawn, Mariel woke to another threat. A letter slipped under the door, detailing her vulnerabilities, manipulated by socialites aiming to fracture the alpha's focus. Alairon's reaction was immediate, scooping her into his arms, carrying her to the window where the city stirred below. "They won't win," he vowed, voice rough with emotion. Physical tension in his hold, protective not possessive, deepening her trust. Atmosphere soft with morning light, contrasting the internal storm rekindling. She traced his jaw, vulnerability shared. "I'm scared, but with you less." Empathy flowed, his golden eyes reflecting her fear, turning it shared. Romantic bond strengthened, obsession revealed as devoted shield. Public steps followed. Alairon confronted a gathering of shifters in a neutral den, Mariel by his side. Atmosphere tense, low lights flickering like wary eyes, air thick with sense of challenge. Rivals sneered, socialites lurking in corners, but Alairon's voice cut through. "Threaten her, and you end." Devotion public, wolf barely leashed, but he held for her. Mariel's heart swelled, recognizing the depth, protective love that empowered her. Internal conflict resolved, she stepped forward. "I'm his, and he's mine. Back off." Connection deepened in that moment, physical graze of hands electric amid threats. Storm brewing outside again, reflecting the chaos, but their unity held firm. Back in the penthouse, rain resuming its assault, they collapsed together, bodies entwining without rush. "You fought for me," she murmured, emotion raw. He nodded, vulnerability in admission. "I'd burn it all for you." Tension built, kisses turning fervent, atmosphere immersive with storm's rhythm. Internal worlds aligned, love tested and triumphant. Rivals escalated, a direct ambush in the city streets, shifters cornering Marielle during a solo errand. Fear spiked, but Oleron's senses alerted him, arriving in a blur of power. Public intervention, Wolf shifting partially to scatter them, devotion screaming in every strike held back from lethal. Marielle watched, recognition solidifying. His obsession protected her freedom, not curtailed it. Empathy in his eyes as he pulled her close post-fight, vulnerability in trembling hands. "Never alone again," he whispered. Atmosphere charged with adrenaline, rain washing blood from pavement, deepening their bond through shared peril. Socialites tried one last manipulation, swaying her family to intervene legally, false claims of coercion. Confrontation in a boardroom, storm clouds gathering outside glass walls. Oleron stood resolute, documents shredded metaphorically by his words. "She's chosen me. Respect it." Marielle's testimony sealed it, voice strong. His love protects, doesn't possess. Romantic payoff in her gaze meeting his, connection unbreakable. As threats faded, penthouse became sanctuary, storm passing to clear skies. They stood on the terrace, hands linked, emotion palpable. "We won," she said, vulnerability in relief. He smiled, golden eyes warm. Love always does. Deepening tie, hooked eternally. Yet tests evolved. Internal doubts crept in quiet moments. Marielle questioned if his protection smothered, conflict stirring. Oleron sensed it, pulling back slightly, empathy guiding. "Tell me your fears." Conversation by firelight, atmosphere cozy yet intense, physical distance testing tension. "I need space to breathe," she confessed, vulnerable. He nodded, Wolf protesting but human understanding. "Then take it. I'll wait." Devotion in restraint, deepening trust. She ventured out alone. Rivals' echoes faint, but returned willingly, craving his arms. Recognition renewed. Protective obsession enhanced her strength. Public events followed, arm in arm. Socialites' jealousy palpable but powerless. Atmosphere glittering. Tension in stolen glances. Connection electric. One gala, a rival whispered doubts in her ear, manipulating old insecurities. Internal chaos flared, but Oleron's hand on her back grounded her. "Believe in us," he murmured, empathy soothing. She did, stepping into his embrace on the dance floor, romantic bond shining. Storm distant now, internal peace reigning. Weeks turned to months, love tested through fires, emerging stronger. Penthouse confrontations became memories, atmosphere serene. Physical tension evolved to intimate comfort, emotion deep. Marielle initiated a moonlit walk, hand in his. "Your obsession, it's my safety." Full recognition, protective, not possessive. He kissed her deeply, Wolf purring. Connection profound, vulnerability shared eternally. Rivals faded into irrelevance, socialites' manipulations crumbling. Their world centered on empathy, human ties overriding beast instincts. In quiet nights, storms, occasional reminders, they built futures, plans whispered in tangled sheets, atmosphere intimate. Internal conflicts minimal now, love's payoff in every touch. Hooked in devotion, story unfolding endlessly. But one final test loomed, a shifter council summoning, questioning the union. Atmosphere formal, ancient halls echoing with judgment. Oleron defended publicly, devotion fierce. "She's my mate, my equal." Marielle stood beside, voice adding weight. "And I choose him." Recognition in council's nod, bond validated. Storm outside symbolic, clearing as they exited hand in hand. Back home, celebration and embraces, tension releasing in passion. Emotion raw, connection unbreakable. This is the moment your heart should be tethered to theirs. Subscribe now, or confess in the comments why you left before the loved one. Shadows of doubt lingered even after the council's approval, testing their bond in subtler ways. Marielle woke one night to thunderous rain, heart racing from dreams of exposure, rivals' faces mocking her worth. Oleron stirred beside her, golden eyes opening instantly, sensing her unrest. Talk to me, he urged, voice soft in the dark, pulling her close without demand. Physical tension in his hold, protective warmth seeping into her chilled skin. What if they're right? What if I'm your weakness? Vulnerability poured out, internal conflict resurfacing amid the storm's roar. Atmosphere heavy, penthouse creaking under wind's assault, immersive chaos reflecting her mind. He traced her arm, empathy in every stroke. You're my strength. Their threats only prove how much you mean. Words deepened connection, his obsession reframed as devoted alliance. She leaned in, lips grazing his, craving overriding fear. Morning brought clarity, but rivals whispered anew. Socialites planting seeds in media, manipulated stories questioning Oleron's judgment. Public scrutiny tested devotion. He addressed it head-on in an interview, voice steady. Marielle is my partner, not a liability. Watching from home, her heart swelled, recognition hitting fresh. Protective love shielded them both. Internal peace grew, empathy for his burden's deepening tie. A family dinner turned confrontation, parents echoing manipulations. Atmosphere tense around the table, storm brewing outside. Marielle's father pressed. End it before ruin. Oleron interjected calmly, hand under table grazing hers. We're unbreakable. Devotion public, physical spark pushing her to stand. He's my choice. Accept it. Connection solidified, family retreating. Rain eased, symbolizing resolution. Daily life wove tests, jealous glances at events, subtle threats via allies. Each time, Oleron's protection shone, not overwhelming but empowering. Marielle learned to counter, her voice growing, internal growth deepening bond. One evening, alone on the terrace, wind whipping hair, she felt watched. Fear spiked, but Oleron appeared, having sensed danger. I won't let them near, he promised, arms enveloping. Vulnerability in her tears. Thank you for seeing me. Empathy mutual, obsession protective haven. Romantic moments balanced chaos, stolen kisses in rain. Atmosphere electric. Physical tension built in grazes, deepening emotion. As threats waned, love flourished, tested but true. Penthouse became home, storm memories fading. Yet empathy kept them hooked, vulnerability the key. Connection eternal, devotion profound. In a quiet cafe, socialite approached Marielle solo, hissing manipulations. He'll possess you entirely. Internal doubt flickered, but she rebuffed. His love protects my freedom. Oleron, waiting nearby, smiled proudly. You handled that. Devotion and praise, deepening trust. Night brought intimacy, bodies aligning in rhythm with distant thunder. Emotion intense, tension releasing in waves. Love tested, won repeatedly, hooked them forever. Rivals' final gambit. Forged evidence to counsel, claiming manipulation. Atmosphere charged in hearing room. Storm raging outside. Oleron presented truth, devotion unwavering. Our bond is real. Marielle testified, voice firm. I recognize his obsession as love's shield. Counsel dismissed, bond affirmed. Romantic payoff in their exit embrace, connection unbreakable. Homeward, rain cleansing, they planned ahead, futures intertwined. This is the moment your heart should be tethered to theirs. Subscribe now, or confess in the comments why you left before the loved one. Empathy defined their days. Oleron shared wolf struggles, vulnerability bared. Control slips when you're threatened. Marielle listened, hand on his. I trust you. Deepening tie, physical comfort in hugs, atmosphere serene. Social circles shifted, jealous ones isolated. Public appearances showcased unity, devotion evident. Internal reflections. Marielle journaled fears, sharing with him. Your protection heals me, recognition constant. He responded with actions, surprises tailored to her, protective gestures subtle. Love's rhythm, tension in anticipation, release in connection. Stormy night revisited penthouse, but now comfort. They watched lightning, bodies close, emotion palpable. You're my everything, he whispered. She nodded, hooked in mutual obsession, protective, devoted. Bond evolved, tests forging strength. Human connection triumphed over chaos. In Park. Is the moment your heart should be tethered to theirs. Subscribe now, or confess in the comments why you left before the loved one. The rooftop garden glowed under a lattice of stars, candle flames flickering like tiny heartbeats against the velvet night. Marielle Vos stood at the edge, the city sprawling below in a mosaic of neon and shadow, her breath catching as the wind tugged at her hair. She felt it, the weight of a choice that could rewrite her life, a moment where fear, thrill, and triumph collided in her chest. Aleron Blackthorn waited behind her, his presence a quiet storm, golden eyes tracing her silhouette as if memorizing every curve. Tonight, she decided, step fully into his world, with all its danger and intensity, or walk away forever. The air carried a crisp bite, laced with the scent of jasmine from the garden's blooms, mingling with Aleron's cedar and leather essence. Marielle's fingers grazed the iron railing, cool under her touch, grounding her as her heart raced. Internal conflict churned, fear of his world's chaos, the shifter battles, the relentless scrutiny, clashing with a thrill that pulsed through her veins, a longing to belong where she'd always been an outcast. His devotion had proven protective, not possessive, but choosing him meant embracing a life where safety was never guaranteed. Aleron stepped closer, silent, his boots soft against the stone tiles, stopping just shy of touching her. The space between them hummed, electric with near contact, his restraint a testament to the human holding back the wolf. "Marielle," he said, voice low, a velvet caress that stirred her core, "you don't have to decide tonight, but I need you to know. I'm here waiting." Vulnerability laced his words, empathy for her turmoil shining through, deepening their connection in the candlelit quiet. She turned, meeting his gaze, golden eyes reflecting the flames, soft yet fierce with unspoken longing. Her heart thudded, fear whispering retreat, but thrill pushed forward, urging her to leap. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling, raw with vulnerability. "Your world, it's fire and teeth and blood. But you make me want to face it." The confession hung between them, pushing the moment forward, her emotional revelation cracking open the walls she'd built. Aleron's jaw tightened, his wolf stirring at her honesty, but he held still, honoring her pace. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek, the almost touch sending a shiver down her spine. "You're not just facing it," he murmured, empathy mirroring her fear. "You're stronger than the danger, stronger than me." The words landed like a spark, igniting her triumph over doubt, hooking their bond tighter in the intimate atmosphere. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across their faces, the rooftop a private haven amid the city's distant hum. Marielle stepped closer, closing the gap, her fingers brushing his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath fabric. Physical tension surged, electric and warm, her body craving the connection her mind still wrestled with. "What if I'm not enough for your world?" she whispered, vulnerability bared, internal conflict laid raw. His hand finally settled on her cheek, thumb grazing her skin, a touch so gentle it belied the power within him. "You're more than enough. You're my world." The declaration was raw, his wolf resting peaceful in her presence, fulfilled by her near choice. Marielle's breath hitched, thrill overtaking fear, the emotional revelation binding them in the flickering light. The wind sighed through the garden, rustling ivy, carrying the faint echo of city horns far below. Atmosphere thickened, immersive and intimate, as if the stars themselves leaned closer to witness her decision. She leaned into his touch, eyes locked on his, seeing the man and the wolf in harmony, both waiting for her. Internal conflict ebbed, fear of danger softened by the triumph of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. "I choose you," she said, voice steady now, a vow that pushed the scene forward. "Your world, your fire, all of it. I'm in." Triumph rang in her words, emotional revelation complete, the surrender to love not a loss but a claiming of her own strength. Oleron's eyes flashed gold, Wolf purring internally, peace settling as he realized she was his by choice, not force. He pulled her closer, arms encircling her, not possessive but protective, their bodies finally touching fully. Physical tension melted into warmth, candlelight painting their embrace in soft golds. "You have no idea what this means," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, vulnerability shared. Her heart swelled, empathy flowing as she felt his relief, his fulfillment, deepening their connection to something eternal. They stood like that, wrapped in each other, the rooftop a sanctuary where time paused. Marielle's fear dissolved, replaced by a thrill that felt like flying, triumph in choosing a life she'd once run from. Oleron's Wolf rested, content in her decision, the human side basking in the mutual love. The atmosphere pulsed with intimacy, candles steady now, as if mirroring their resolved hearts. But the choice wasn't the end, only a beginning. Days later, in the quiet of Oleron's penthouse, the city glittering below, Marielle felt the weight of her decision settle. A rival shifter's lingering threat, a note slipped under the door, promising retribution, stirred her fear again. She showed it to Oleron, vulnerability in her trembling hands, but his calm gaze steadied her. "Together," he said, hand covering hers, physical tension grounding her. The atmosphere shifted, morning light streaming through windows, immersive with the scent of coffee and his nearness. "I'm not running," she declared, internal conflict pushed aside, triumph in her resolve. His smile was soft, Wolf at peace, their connection deepening as empathy flowed. He understood her fear, shared her strength. They faced the threat head-on, attending a shifter gathering where rivals lurked. The den was dim, air thick with musk and challenge, atmosphere tense yet thrilling. Oleron's arm brushed hers, a silent promise, physical tension electric as eyes followed them. Marielle stood tall, choice affirmed, her voice cutting through whispers, "I'm his by choice." Emotional revelation public, triumph sealing their bond. Rivals backed off, sensing her resolve. Oleron's Wolf calm in her strength. Back on the rooftop that night, candles relit, they talked. Intimate, raw, revealing dreams. "I used to think I'd always be alone," she confessed, vulnerability bared. "Now I know I'm home." His fingers intertwined with hers, physical tension warm, atmosphere immersive with starlight. Oleron shared his own fears, voice low. "I worried my wolf would scare you away." Empathy mirrored her openness, deepening their tie. Her hand grazed his jaw, thrill in the touch, triumph in mutual vulnerability. "It never could," she said, sealing her choice with a kiss, soft, then deepening, emotional revelation in every press of lips. The city hummed below, oblivious to their private world, but the rooftop held them, candles flickering like promises kept. Internal conflict gone, Marielle's fear transformed into thrill, triumph in embracing his intensity. Oleron's Wolf rested fully, fulfilled by her choice, their connection a living pulse. Days wove into weeks, each moment testing her choice but strengthening it. A quiet dinner, atmosphere cozy with candlelight, their hands grazing over wine glasses, tension sweet. "You make danger worth it," she murmured, emotional revelation deepening love. His eyes softened, Wolf at peace, human heart full. A walk through autumn streets, leaves crunching, air crisp, immersive with city sounds. Physical tension in linked hands, empathy in shared glances. "You're my calm," he admitted, vulnerability raw. Her thrill surged, triumph in being his anchor, connection unbreakable. Challenges persisted, socialites' whispers, shifter politics, but her choice held firm. In a council meeting, atmosphere formal, she spoke beside him. "We're one." Emotional revelation public, Oleron's Wolf purring, fulfilled by her unwavering stand. Nights brought intimacy, rooftop revisits where candles burned steady. Physical tension evolved to comfort, kisses carrying emotional weight. I'd choose you every time, she whispered, thrill in her voice, triumph complete. His arms tightened, peace settling deep, connection eternal. One evening, a storm loomed, mirroring past chaos, but Marielle faced it on the rooftop, Aleron beside her. Atmosphere charged, rain threatening, but her heart was steady. I'm not afraid anymore, she said, vulnerability gone, thrill and triumph intertwined. He kissed her, lightning flashing, wolf at rest, their bond sealed in the storm's embrace. The city pulsed, but their world was this, candlelit, intimate, immersive. Internal conflicts resolved, fear replaced by love's thrill, triumph in every shared breath. Aleron's hand grazed her back, tension warm, emotional revelation in his whisper. You're my forever. She nodded, choice affirmed daily, connection profound. The rooftop, once a place of doubt, now their sanctuary, atmosphere alive with love's victory. But choices deepen, and theirs grew roots. A quiet moment in the penthouse, morning light soft, coffee scent wrapping them. What's next for us? She asked, hand on his, physical tension subtle but present. His eyes held hers, empathy clear. Whatever you want together. Thrill surged, triumph in shared futures. They planned, trips, dreams, a life blending his world with hers. Atmosphere immersive, city waking outside, their connection the heartbeat within. A shifter festival tested her again, atmosphere vibrant with drums and firelight. Rivals watched, but her choice shone, dancing with Aleron, bodies close, tension electric. I belong here, she whispered, emotional revelation public, his wolf fulfilled. Back home, candles lit, they collapsed together, laughter mingling with kisses. You make me whole, he confessed, vulnerability raw. Her thrill peaked, triumph in being his peace, connection eternal. Daily life wove love's thread, quiet mornings, stolen touches, atmosphere always intimate. Internal peace reigned, fear a distant memory. Physical tension in every graze, emotional depth in every word. One night, under stars, she initiated, mark me as yours. Bold, thrilling, triumph in choice. Aleron's eyes flashed, wolf at peace, human heart soaring. The mark was gentle, soul deep, their bond sealed forever. The rooftop held them, candles eternal, city below a canvas of their love. Thrill, triumph, connection, hers by choice, his by devotion. Weeks later, a new threat, a rogue shifter's challenge. Atmosphere tense, forest clearing at dusk, air heavy with pine. Marielle stood beside him, choice unwavering. We face it as one. Emotional revelation in her stance, his wolf calm, fulfilled by her strength. Victory swift, bond deeper. Back on the rooftop, candles glowing, they embraced, tension warm, thrill alive. Always you, he murmured, empathy profound. Her heart answered, triumph complete, connection eternal. The city evolved, but their love was constant. Candlelit nights, shared dreams, atmosphere immersive. Physical tension in every touch, emotional depth in every glance. Internal worlds aligned, fear gone, thrill and triumph theirs. Aleron's wolf rested, her choice is peace. One dawn, rooftop bathed in pink light, she whispered, I'd choose you forever. He smiled, hand grazing hers, connection unending. The city streets pulsed with life, neon lights bleeding into puddles that reflected Marielle Voss's past, a place where she'd once walked as a shadow, worthless in the eyes of those who should have loved her. Now, hand in hand with Aleron Blackthorn, her steps echoed with purpose, each one a quiet defiance of the chain she'd broken. No kiss sealed this moment, but the air thrummed with a promise, a whispered vow that bound them deeper than touch. Their fingers laced tightly, his warmth anchoring her, as the city's heartbeat mirrored the catharsis swelling in her chest. Awe at love's triumph over fear, belief in a bond that shattered societal shackles. Dusk painted the skyline in purples and golds, the atmosphere alive with the hum of traffic and the distant wail of a saxophone from a street corner. Marielle's heart beat steady, no longer racing with doubt, but pulsing with certainty. Internal conflict lingered faintly. Memories of feeling discarded stung like old bruises, but Oleron's presence beside her soothed them, his quiet strength a reminder of her worth. His golden eyes flicked to her, soft yet intense, carrying empathy that made her feel seen, not judged. They walked down the same cracked sidewalks where she'd once hurried, head down, avoiding eyes that dismissed her. Now, heads turned, not in scorn, but in curiosity, sensing the power radiating from the alpha and the woman who'd claimed his heart. Physical tension simmered in their linked hands, his thumb grazing her knuckles, a subtle touch that sent warmth curling through her veins. "This is where I first saw you," he murmured, voice low, conversational, like sharing a secret with a friend. Lost, but not broken. Her breath caught, vulnerability surfacing as she met his gaze. "I felt broken," she admitted, the confession raw, pushing their connection deeper. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of light that danced around them, immersive and intimate, as if the city itself witnessed their bond. Oleron's grip tightened slightly, not possessive but protective, his wolf content in her choice, the human side reveling in her trust. The wind carried the scent of rain and hot pavement, mingling with his cedar essence, grounding her in the moment. Internal conflict stirred. Could she truly belong in a world of danger and power? But the thrill of his nearness drowned it out. "You're not that girl anymore," he said, stopping under a flickering neon sign, its buzz adding to the atmosphere's electric charge. "You're my equal, Marielle. Always were." Empathy laced his words, mirroring her past pain, deepening the emotional tie. She turned to him, the city fading to a hum, their world shrinking to the space between them. Her free hand grazed his jacket, physical tension sparking as her fingers lingered, not quite touching skin but close enough to feel his warmth. "I choose this, us, every day," she whispered, voice steady, a vow that pushed the scene forward. Catharsis bloomed, aught the love that had rewritten her story, belief in its strength overwhelming old fears. Oleron's eyes softened, wolf at peace, his smile small but profound. "And I'll choose you every day," he promised, words a whisper that carried the weight of forever. No kiss, but the promise hung heavier, their almost touch electric, binding them in a moment of pure connection. The atmosphere thickened, street sounds muffled, as if time paused to honor their bond. They resumed walking, hands still linked, the city unfolding around them. Vendors calling, headlights streaking, life vibrant yet distant. Marielle felt the weight of her past lift, each step a reclamation of these streets, now hers to walk with pride. Internal peace settled, fear replaced by belief in their love, a triumph that made her chest ache with joy. A street performer's guitar strummed nearby, notes weaving into the atmosphere, immersive and soulful. Oleron slowed, pulling her gently to a stop by a park entrance, where fairy lights twinkled in the trees, casting a soft glow. "Tell me what you see now," he said, voice gentle, urging vulnerability. Her heart opened, empathy flowing as she sensed his need to know her fully. "I see home," she said, eyes tracing the city's pulse, then settling on him. "Not just here, but you." Emotional revelation deepened their tie, catharsis in admitting she'd found belonging. His hand squeezed hers, physical tension warm, a silent vow that hooked their souls tighter. The night deepened, stars peeking through the city's haze, atmosphere intimate despite the open streets. They wandered toward a quieter alley, where graffiti murals glowed under sodium lights, vibrant and raw. Marielle's past whispered here, she'd once hidden in these shadows, feeling invisible. Now, Oleron's presence made her feel radiant, his empathy a mirror to her growth, vulnerability shared in every glance. "You changed everything," she said, stopping to face him, her hand rising to graze his jaw, tension sparking at the touch. Internal conflict gone, she leaned into the awe of their bond, belief in love's power overwhelming. I was nothing here and now I'm everything. Her voice broke, emotional payoff resonating, catharsis complete. Aleron's breath hitched, wolf calm, human heart full. You were never nothing, he murmured, fingers brushing her wrist, a lingering touch that promised more than words could. You're my everything. The vow sealed their connection, physical tension humming without need for a kiss, their bond profound in its restraint. They stood there, alley walls closing them in, atmosphere thick with history and hope. The city's pulse faded, leaving only their shared breaths, the soft graze of fingers, the unspoken promise of forever. Marielle felt triumph, awe at love's ability to heal, belief in its strength to defy her past. A distant siren wailed, pulling them back to motion, but the connection held, hands linked as they emerged into brighter streets. The atmosphere shifted, livelier now, with laughter from a nearby cafe, but their world remained intimate, centered on each other. Where to now? She asked, voice light, vulnerability giving way to playful thrill. Anywhere you want, he replied, golden eyes warm, empathy in his openness. As long as it's with you. The promise pushed their story forward, deepening the emotional tie, physical tension in their clasped hands a constant reminder of their bond. They passed a street market, stalls glowing with lanterns, scents of spice and bread wrapping around them, immersive and vibrant. Marielle paused at a vendor selling charms, her fingers grazing a silver wolf pendant, a symbol of her choice. Aleron's hand covered hers, tension sparking, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. For you, he said, buying it, his touch lingering as he fastened it around her neck, emotional payoff in the gesture's intimacy. The pendant rested cool against her skin, a tangible vow, catharsis in its weight. She touched it, belief in their love solidifying, awe at its resilience. It's us, she whispered, voice thick, deepening their connection. His nod was subtle, wolf at peace, their bond eternal. They walked on, city lights painting their path, atmosphere alive with possibility. Internal peace reigned for Marielle, her past shadows gone, replaced by love's light. Physical tension in every graze, emotional depth in every glance, kept them hooked, their story unfolding with each step. A rooftop bar loomed ahead, music spilling into the night, inviting but not intrusive. They climbed the stairs, hands still linked, emerging into a space where fairy lights and candles created an intimate glow. The atmosphere shifted, softer now, immersive with the city's skyline as backdrop. Dance with me, Aleron said, not commanding but inviting, his voice a caress. She stepped into his arms, bodies close but not kissing, tension electric in their almost touch. The music flooded her waist, warm and steady, physical tension humming. You're my everything, he echoed, empathy mirroring her emotion, wolf content in her choice. They swayed, city below pulsing, their world centered on this moment, emotional payoff profound. The night stretched, stars brighter now, atmosphere wrapping them in intimacy. Marielle's heart swelled, triumph in every shared breath, awe at love's defiance of her past. I'm not running anymore, she said, voice firm, pushing their bond forward. His smile was soft, golden eyes warm, promise in their depths. They left the bar, descending to the streets, hands linked, tension warm. The city felt new, hers to claim with him beside her. A street artist sketched nearby, charcoal scratching paper, adding to the atmosphere's vibrancy. Marielle paused, watching, then turned to Aleron. We're writing our own story, she said, emotional revelation deepening their tie. He nodded, fingers grazing her cheek, tension sparking without need for more. And it's forever, he promised, voice low, thou sealing their bond. Catharsis washed over her, belief in love's strength unshakable, awe at its beauty. They walked on, past the places where she'd once felt small, each step a victory. The atmosphere pulsed, City alive, but there's alone, immersive with sounds and scents. Internal peace complete. Marielle's heart was light, triumph in every glance shared with Oleron. A park loomed, trees whispering in the breeze, fairy lights twinkling like stars brought low. They sat on a bench, hands still linked, tension warm in their closeness. "Tell me a dream," she said, vulnerability inviting his. The atmosphere softened, intimate and serene, deepening their connection. "I dream of you, safe, happy, mine by choice," he said, voice raw, empathy flowing. Her heart ached, catharsis in his honesty, awe at their shared love. "I'm here," she replied, squeezing his hand, triumph in her choice, belief in their bond. The night wrapped them, city fading to background, their world intimate. Physical tension in every graze, emotional depth in every word, kept them hooked. "We've overcome everything," she whispered, voice thick, emotional payoff complete. His thumb traced her knuckles, promise in the touch. "And we'll keep overcoming," he vowed, wolf at peace, human heart full. Catharsis resonated, awe at love's resilience, belief in its eternity. They rose, walking deeper into the park, moonlight casting shadows, atmosphere magical. Marielle's past felt distant, her present vibrant with love. "I believe in us," she said, voice steady, triumph shining. His arm wrapped around her, tension warm, connection eternal. The city slept, but their bond pulsed, alive and unbreakable. Each step forward, hand in hand, was a promise, no kiss needed, their love spoken in touches, glances, whispered vows. Catharsis in every moment, awe at love's power, belief in its defiance of all odds. Weeks later, they returned to these streets, routine now but never dull. The atmosphere varied, rainy nights, sunny days, but always immersive, their connection the constant. Physical tension in stolen grazes, emotional depth in shared dreams, kept their story alive. A quiet cafe moment, coffee scent wrapping them. Marielle touched the wolf pendant. "This is us," she said, vulnerability shared. Oleron's hand covered hers, tension sparking, empathy in his gaze. "Forever," he promised, catharsis in the word, awe in their bond. Challenges faded, love's triumph complete. Internal peace theirs, fear gone, belief unshakable. They walked on, city theirs, atmosphere vibrant with possibility. One night, under a full moon, they stood in the park, hands linked, tension warm. "I'd choose you every time," she said, emotional revelation final. His eyes glowed, wolf content, human fulfilled. "And I you," he whispered, promise eternal. Their bond, forged in streets where she'd been nothing, now shone, catharsis profound, awe at love's victory, belief in its forever. If you've stayed until now, your heart belongs here. Subscribe or tell us your country in the comments and admit why you resisted the bond. Don't leave love waiting. The city never stopped, but their moments did. Frozen in glances, touches, promises. A street fair, lanterns glowing, atmosphere festive, deepened their tie. Her laughter, his smile, physical tension in a shared dance, emotional payoff in every step. Internal peace grew, past shadows gone. "You made me whole," she confessed, vulnerability raw. His hand grazed her cheek, tension electric, awe in his gaze. "You were always whole," he said, belief in her strength sealing their bond. They walked on, streets familiar yet new, love rewriting history. Atmosphere alive, immersive with city sounds, their connection the heartbeat. Catharsis in every shared moment, triumph in love's defiance, belief in its eternity. A rooftop revisit, candles flickering, atmosphere intimate. "We're unstoppable," she said, thrill in her voice, triumph complete. His arm around her, tension warm, promise in his nod. Together, he vowed, catharsis shared, awe profound.